This is my Black Forest Roulade, a combination of a light chocolate sponge, sweet and sour cherry compote, a luxurious vanilla chantilly, and a rich chocolate ganache. First, we start by making the cherry compote. Into a mixing bowl, add in caster sugar and pectin. Whisk to evenly distribute the pectin into the sugar, and to remove any clumps of sugar. This will also stop the pectin from clumping when added to the cherries. Once fully combined, set it to the side. We'll come back to it a little later. Next, place a saucepan onto the hob and add in your frozen cherries. I'm using a combination of Morello cherries, which are sour and tart, and in my opinion provide a lot of flavour, and dark sweet cherries. I always find that dark sweet cherries never really add too much flavour, but will help balance the sourness. On a low to medium heat, gently cook the cherries, helping draw out the natural juices. Keep stirring every so often. As the heat starts to increase and the cherries start to warm through, you'll see the pan start to fill with more of the juices. Keep this going until the juices start to boil, at which point we'll add in the sugar and pectin. Pectin is a natural ingredient. It's present in the cell walls of fruit and vegetables, commercially extracted from citrus peels or apple pomace. Now that we're at a boil, we're going to slowly sprinkle in the sugar and pectin while continuously stirring. Keep stirring until all the sugar has dissolved, and leave the compote to come back to a boil. Pectin acts as a gelling agent and a thickener. It's what's commonly used in jam production. In this case, the pectin is going to allow us to thicken the compote and keep the cherries whole for that textural element. Once the compote has come to a boil, we're going to let this boil out for 2 minutes. This will cause the pectin molecules to swell. After 2 minutes, off the heat, we're going to add in lemon juice. The citric acid in the lemon juice is going to remove the negative charge of the pectin molecules. This is going to allow them to link together, trapping any liquid, forming that jam or jelly-like consistency. Decant the compote into a container and surface wrap with cling film and place into the fridge to completely cool. This will take around 2 to 3 hours. Pectin's pretty cheap and easy to source, but I'll have links for all the ingredients and equipment in the description below. Next, we move on to making the ganache. Into a clean pan, add in your whipping cream and gently bring to a boil on a medium heat. For this ganache, I use a supermarket chocolate. It's not what I normally use, but I've done it as an experiment. And let's just say, the results were quite staggering. If you're interested in me doing a deeper dive into why paying a little bit more for premium chocolate matters and the difference in quality of the final product, let me know in the comments below. Once the cream has come to a boil, pour it over your dark chocolate and let it steep for about 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, with a spatula, gently stir the chocolate into the cream until all the chocolate is melted and you've got a smooth, silky liquid ganache. Refrain from using a whisk. By using a whisk, you're going to incorporate a lot of air. Ganache can actually last for months in the fridge, but by introducing a lot of air, the shelf life reduces dramatically. For best practice and to achieve a really smooth ganache, the best option is a stick blender. A stick blender will help create a stable emulsion by binding fats and liquids quickly and leave you with a smooth, glossy ganache. Once your ganache is ready, decant it into a container and surface wrap with cling film. Cover with a lid and leave at room temperature to set. I normally make this a day in advance of using if I don't have any ganache on hand. Next, we're going to make the chocolate Génoise sponge, a lovely light and airy sponge, typically made of 3 ingredients: eggs, sugar and flour, and in this case a 4th ingredient, cocoa powder. Start by sifting your dry ingredients, flour and cocoa powder, to help remove any clumps. Once all your dry ingredients are sifted, set the bowl to the side. A Génoise sponge doesn't use any chemical leavening agents like baking powder. Instead, it gets its light and fluffy texture by incorporating air. There are 2 ways in which we can do this. Either we make a hot sabayon or a cold sabayon. Sabayon is a process of whisking eggs and sugar until it volumizes. To make a hot sabayon, you set the mixing bowl over a bain-marie and whisk the eggs and sugar until you reach a ribbon stage. A cold sabayon is done the same way, just without the bain-marie, which is the technique we're using here. The key to achieving a stable mix here is to use room temperature eggs. Start by mixing on a low speed, and once the sugar and eggs are fully combined, gradually increase your mixer to a high speed. Continue to mix the eggs until they have approximately tripled in volume. This will take anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes. In this video I've broken the sabayon down into 4 distinct stages. We're currently looking at stage 3. The mixture has turned a pale cream colour, which can be deceiving. It looks aerated, but the structure is still too loose and thin. If you stop now, the sabayon will simply collapse. Now in stage 4, you'll notice that the volume is increased and thickened, giving the sabayon stability for the next part. In this next part, we're going to complete the Génoise sponge. Gently fold in your dry ingredients a third at a time. Doing this in 1/3 increments will mean that the flour and cocoa powder won't sink to the bottom and clump. Also, it will allow you to control the mixture a lot easier without knocking too much of the air out. I typically do this with a whisk. I find that a whisk flows a lot better, reducing the risk of knocking out too much air. Once I've combined all my dry ingredients, I will finish this off with a spatula, scraping the sides of the bowl to make sure everything is incorporated, making sure there's no flour or cocoa powder stuck to the sides. Now I know what you're thinking. You just told us to fold in the dry ingredients gently, and you're mixing so aggressively. I've sped up this part to 2 times speed. We'll get back to 1 time speed in just a little while. Okay, now back to normal playback speed. I'm just going to finish off mixing with the spatula. Then into a 40 by 30 cm tray lined with a silicone mat. Pour in the Génoise sponge mixture and using a palette knife, spread evenly. I always use a silicone mat when baking aerated sponges. The reason being, with greaseproof paper or parchment paper, sponges generally tend to shrink a little when cooling. Plus, if there's any air bubbles trapped, it will cause paper to move and wrinkle, leaving you with an uneven surface. So I use a silicone mat just to guarantee a flat, even sponge. Once your sponge is leveled, bake it in a preheated oven at 160 degrees Celsius or 320 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 12 minutes, and you should have something that looks like this. Leave this to cool for 5 to 10 minutes, but we still want the sponge to be warm, but cold enough that we can handle it without burning ourselves. With a knife or a palette knife, just run it around the edge of the sponge to help release it from the sides of the baking tray. Place a piece of greaseproof paper over the top, followed by a chopping board, and flip out onto the chopping board. Gently peel back the silicone mat to release the sponge. Next, place another piece of baking paper over the top and gently roll to form its distinctive shape. You can also do this with a damp tea towel. This will help provide additional moisture as the sponge cools, keeping it soft and moist. But I've always done this with paper and it's worked just fine. I haven't had any problems with the sponge drying out. As long as you do this at the right time, the sponge will be just fine. While the sponge cools for around 30 minutes or so, we can go ahead and make the chantilly. Start by adding whipping cream and icing sugar to a mixing bowl. And for this recipe I've chosen to use vanilla pods, but you can also use vanilla paste. For the vanilla pod, split it down the middle and scrape the inside of the pod with the edge of your knife. Add the vanilla seeds to the cream and fit your stand mixer with a whisk attachment. Start your mixer on a low speed just until the sugar is incorporated into the cream, and gradually increase your speed to medium-high until the cream comes to medium peaks. This will take somewhere around 2 to 3 minutes. We want to be careful not to over whip the cream here, because in the next stage, as we spread the cream across the surface of the sponge, it will continue to whip a little bit more. If the sponge isn't cool enough, set the chantilly into the fridge until you're ready to use. For the final assembly, unravel the sponge and remove the top baking paper, keeping the sponge on the bottom paper as this will come in handy a little later. Next, spread your layer of chantilly. I've put the chantilly and compote into piping bags. This is going to allow me to spread an even layer of chantilly and compote onto the sponge. I pipe chantilly in a zigzag pattern down the sponge, leaving an inch around the outer edge. Using a palette knife, I'll spread the chantilly in an even layer across the surface of the sponge, ensuring a smooth finish right to the edge. Now we repeat the process with the cherry compote. The secret here is a delicate touch, and the pectin. The pectin is going to stop the compote from bleeding into the chantilly. Pipe your lines of compote across the surface of the chantilly. Using a palette knife, gently guide it over the compote to help spread an even layer over the surface of the chantilly, ensuring you aren't pressing down into the cream. If you do this correctly, you'll end up with a lovely marbled effect rather than a blended one, giving you clear, distinctive layers in every slice. Now for the most crucial part, the roll. Using the parchment paper as your guide, lift the edge and begin to tuck the sponge into a tight spiral. Once rolled, place a long ruler against the base of the roulade. While holding the bottom layer of the paper, push the ruler firmly against the cake to tuck and tighten the roll into a perfect uniform cylinder. To ensure the structure sets and the layers meld beautifully, I recommend placing the roulade into the freezer overnight. If you're short on time, a minimum of 4 hours in the fridge is essential to achieve those sharp, clean slices we're looking for. Remove the roulade from the fridge or freezer and place onto a chopping board. With a knife, trim the edges. I would normally do this after decorating with the ganache, but I was going for a rough tree bark kind of aesthetic, so I trimmed the edges beforehand. Now for the final decoration. Place the roulade onto your preferred serving dish or cake card. Scrape a little ganache with the tip of a palette knife. Starting from the top and in the center, spread across the length of the roulade. Work your way around the roulade, gently overlapping each layer. This is going to help create the effect of the tree bark. Keep this going, working from left to right, right to left, towards the middle, just building up your layers, keeping it as irregular as possible. This is going to give you that natural wood effect. I'm not sure if you can tell, but the ganache that I've made here is pretty tough to work with. It sat in a room overnight at 22 degrees Celsius and it's still pretty firm. This is what I meant by the results were staggering earlier in the video. Like I said, if you're interested in me doing a deep dive in a comparison between supermarket and premium chocolates, let me know in the comments below. I decided to leave the roulade finished just with the ganache, but feel free to get as creative as possible. You could finish decorating with some gold leaf, maybe some extra cherries on top, whatever you like. Do as your heart desires. I hope you truly enjoyed watching this video and learned a little something along the way. I would greatly appreciate if you could like and subscribe and hit that notification bell for every time I upload. As always, the link to the full recipe on my website is in the description below, along with all the links for the equipment and ingredients I've used. Every purchase you make through those links helps generate a little revenue for me at no additional cost to you and helps support the channel. I truly hope you enjoyed watching this video, and if you've tried any of my recipes, let me know in the comments below or on the comments in my website. Until next time, happy baking.